We started this morning with the Professor Emerita, and we were going to close this day also with the Professor Emerita. We are so happy to have Bridget Shield here. She is a Professor Emerita in Acoustics at London South Bank University. And actually, you're a little bit difficult to present as you did so many things. She has been looking into the effects of industrial noise, community response to railway noise, concert hall acoustics, annoyance caused by low-frequency noise, and hospital noise, and so on. But you have also been working very much with children and the effects of poor acoustics, and we are looking forward to listening to you. Very warm welcome, Bridget.
Oh, thank you very much, and thank you very much for inviting me to be here. I must say it's been a privilege being here. It's been such an interesting, enjoyable day, so thank you very much for asking me. I'm going to talk about the effects of noise in school on children from the age of 7 to 16. What I'm going to do is just start with a very brief overview of sort of research that's gone on over the last sort of 50 years or so into the effects of noise on children at school. And then I'll talk a bit about the research that I've been involved with looking at primary school children, and I'll finish by talking about the sort of more recent work that we've done looking at the effects of noise on secondary school pupils. So if you look back through the literature, there's been quite a lot since the sort of mid-1960s, and coming up with similar sorts of results, evidence all pointing to sort of creating a body of evidence showing that noise in schools affects memory, verbal and non-verbal tasks, attention, letter number and word recognition, and reading. And some of these work that's gone towards finding this, as we've heard about earlier today. It also causes disturbance and distraction in the classroom and causes annoyance to pupils. And there's been quite a lot of anecdotal evidence to show that the less able children or children with particular needs in the classroom are more affected by noise than the other children. And the sources of noise that have been considered have been aircraft noise that we've heard a bit about, railway noise, noise from road traffic, and all of those have been shown to affect memory, reduce reading comprehension, reduced attention. There's been a little bit of work showing reduced performance in mathematics as well. There's been less work done on the noise created within the classroom and the impact of that on the pupils, and that's something that we focused on in our research, so I'll talk about that in a moment. But it has been shown that noise within the classroom, whether it's from external noise sources or noise created within the school or within the classroom, does cause annoyance to pupils and does affect hearing and understanding the teacher. Now, Irena mentioned earlier the study that she's been involved with, the Ranch study, and I've also mentioned the NORA study here. There have been many, many studies since the early days of research in this area, many studies into the effects of aircraft noise. I think the earliest study was, I can't remember the date, 1960 something, when they first started introducing jet aircraft into Heathrow. And there was this big European study that Irena mentioned, the Ranch study, which looked at the effects of noise around Heathrow, Schiphol and Madrid-Barajas airports. And that showed that aircraft noise affects reading and causes annoyance. And then the German study, the recent German study that's just been published by Maria Klatter, also showed effects on reading and annoyance. And just a couple of examples. So Charlotte Clark sent me this slide last week so I could show it. It just shows the similarities between different studies in aircraft noise. That was showing the effects of aircraft noise on reading in the Ranch project, and that's the recently published study by Maria Klatt. So again, sort of definitive evidence that, conclusive evidence that noise affects reading. And they've both shown that children's reading age is delayed by a few months in schools which are subject to higher levels of aircraft noise. So the work that I've been involved in, all the research that I've done on classroom acoustics has been with Julie Dockrell at the Institute of Education in London. And the work that we did in secondary schools, we've had several projects looking at different aspects of noise in primary schools. And then we also had a big project looking at noise in secondary schools, which we also did with Trevor Cox at Salford University. And we've had a big team of researchers working on the different projects as well. Schools are subject to lots and lots of different noise sources, or they can be. Because there've been plenty of other studies about aircraft noise, we decided to restrict ourselves to schools that weren't predominantly exposed to aircraft noise. So, for example, we avoided schools in West London where they're under the Heathrow flight path. And we looked specifically at the effects of environmental or road traffic noise mainly, and a bit of railway noise, and also on noise created within the school, classroom noise or classroom babble, as we called it, because there seemed to be a sort of lack of data on that particular topic. So what we did in all the projects, in primary schools and secondary schools, we did noise surveys of noise outside the school, noise inside the schools, in all the different areas within the school, in occupied classrooms, in different types of lessons and so on. We did questionnaire surveys of the pupils' attitudes to noise, how aware they were of the noise, whether they were annoyed by noise, how aware they were of any interference of the noise with understanding and hearing the teacher. We looked at the effects of noise on the pupils' performance, and in both primary and secondary schools we did that by experimental testing. So we artificially created the sounds that we knew from our noise surveys, the types and levels of sound that the pupils were experiencing, and then gave them various different tests in those different environments. And we also, with the primary school children, because we have nationalised standardised tests in the UK at the age of 7 and the age of 11, we compared the noise levels in primary schools with the results of the tests for those schools. And we also looked at the, in both studies, in both primary and secondary schools, looked at the impact of noise on children with special needs. So I'm not going to present any noise results, not in detail, but I'm going to focus on questionnaire responses and the effects of noise. And I'm not going to go into any detail because there isn't time, so I'm just going to give you a sort of broad brush picture of the sorts of results that we have found. So primary schools, these are fairly typical of the sorts of primary schools that we were measuring in. We've still got a lot of Victorian schools, particularly in London, like the school on the left. And so we chose schools in London and South East England. What we found when we measured the noise levels in primary schools, as you would expect, the noise level, sorry, it's a bit dark, but the noise levels depend very much on what the children are actually doing in the classroom. But there is a very, very wide range. So the lowest noise levels were around sort of 50, 55 decibels when the children are just working silently on their own, up to noise levels in the higher 70s, 80 dB, and sometimes much higher, when the children are doing very active art classes, running around the classroom, and so on. This was in primary schools, but something that really surprised us, when we did all these measurements, we did nearly 300 lessons, I think, in secondary schools. And when we looked at the sort of the levels averaged over the lessons, we actually found very similar results to the primary schools. The average lesson noise level was exactly the same in secondary schools as it was in primary schools. We thought it would be lower, but it was the same. So in primary schools, we did questionnaire survey. This was a paper-based exercise of the 7-year-olds and 11-year-olds in primary school. And we asked them if they could hear noise, and if so, were they annoyed by it. And what we found was that the older children were more aware of external noise, and the younger children were more annoyed by it. So if they heard it, it was the younger children who were the more annoyed. And we found that both awareness and annoyance were related to the noise levels that we'd measured outside the schools. We found that the children were also aware of the noise causing problems in hearing their teachers, so they had the smiley face scale. And they were asked how easy it was to hear the teacher in lots of different situations in the classroom. And as you might expect, it was the younger children who found it more difficult to hear what the teacher was saying in noise. And again, the ability to hear the teacher was related to the noise levels that we'd measured outside the schools. These were London schools, though, so the noise levels, well, they varied quite a lot and were sort of quite high. A lot of the schools are on main roads and things. When we looked at the schools, we compared the sort of average school scores in the various tests, in these standardized tests, with the noise levels, with the average noise levels that we'd measured outside and inside the schools. And we found we got significant negative relationships between all the noise levels and all the school tests. So the higher the noise levels, the worse the school's performance in the standardized tests. And these results held when we corrected for the various socioeconomic factors like social deprivation and so on. The relationships were stronger for the older, the 11-year-old children. We found that the school scores were related to the maximum noise levels measured outside the school. So we interpreted that as meaning it was distraction by individual noise events, things like a motorbike going past or an ambulance siren or something like that. And they were also related to the background noise levels in the classroom, which we took to mean the sort of the general hubbub, classroom babble. So just to give you a couple of examples, I can make this. Both of these are for the results for the older children, the 11-year-olds. So in the maths tests, you see we've got a wide scatter, but we've got a statistically significant relationship here. The higher the noise level, the worse the school's performance. This was with external noise levels, and this one is this is the maximum external levels. And this one is with the background. Oh, I'm sorry, I've lost the light. The other one is with the background noise levels in the classroom and the English scores. And the experimental testing, where the psychologists put together this package of tests, reading, arithmetic, spelling, and then we also measured speed of processing. And the one on the left, the columns on the left are the performance, the score, different scoring systems, but basically the score on the left is in quiet and the score on the right is when they're in classroom babble at the sorts of typical levels that we'd measured it. And you can see that the performance goes down in all those, in all the tests, the performance goes down when they're being done in the classroom babble. And if we have a look at the children with special needs, these tests were all, there were about 350 children and about a quarter of them had special needs. We weren't able to find out what those special needs were. All we knew is we knew which children actually had some additional learning need. But when we compared the results, maybe I can, this shows the performance going from quiet to babble for the typically developing children in reading and in spelling. So you can see a decrease in performance. But if you look at the children with special needs, they start off at a much lower point, but the decrease in their performance is much more significant in both reading and in spelling for the children with special needs. So showing that the noise had a greater impact upon those children. So moving on to the secondary schools, the work was done in 13 secondary schools around the country, and we tried to choose rural, suburban and urban locations, and we tried to choose schools of different sizes, different academic performance as rated by the quality inspectors, and in school buildings of different ages as well. And this time it was a laptop-based survey, so there was a online questionnaire that the students did, and the testing was all done. They were given the noise through headphones, and the testing was done on laptops. So this is just a sample question. So they were multiple choice questions, and we had responses from about 2,500 students. The questions sort of fell roughly into 4 categories: ease of hearing in different school spaces, annoyance due to noise from different sources, consequences of noise during lessons, what happens if there is a lot of noise in the classroom, and then the sensitivity to noise during different classroom activities. So what are the particular things that are affected, that you do in the classroom, that are affected by noise? Roughly the same sort of types of questions as the primary school children answered. So just picking out some of the results from that. For ease of hearing, the most difficult rooms, which were mentioned earlier, sports halls and dining rooms, as you might expect, the most difficult rooms to hear in. And the condition in which it was most difficult to hear was when students were talking either in their own classroom or in other rooms in the school that could be heard. The most annoying noises, again similar to the primary schools, were noise from sirens, from trains, interestingly, and from students talking, again other students talking in the classroom. The most commonly cited consequence of noise occurring during lessons was affecting concentration being broken, and also noise leading to more noise, increased noise by the other students, and to the teacher raising their voice. And then the biggest impact of noise, the biggest activity that was affected by noise was when the students were doing a test or exam, which again you might be expected. The older students, and this I can't remember if I said, but the questionnaire. So it was about 2,500 respondents from the age of 11 to the age of 16. And it was the older students who were more affected. And the impact was greater in what we referred to as acoustically compromised schools. That's schools where there were higher levels of external noise, or that had, well, there was one school that was completely open plan, and some of the other schools had open plan spaces in them. And the impact of noise was greater in those schools. Then we looked at the responses of pupils with additional learning needs, and this time we did know what the particular needs were, which were English as an additional language, pupils who had some sort of learning support in the classroom, and pupils who were hearing impaired. And if you look, this shows the groups with different needs that on the 4 different categories of question, the responses to the 4 different categories. So this group are the pupils with no additional learning needs. These ones, English as an additional language with learning support, hearing impaired pupils, and then also students who had multiple learning needs, which meant they had 2 or 3 of the additional needs. And the things to note are that, again, as you might expect, the pupils with multiple needs were the most affected in all the 4 categories of question, and those with no additional needs were the least, you can see, were the least affected. That was interesting. We weren't expecting that pupils with English as an additional language were the most sensitive to noise, and don't quite know what the reason was for that. And then, as you would expect, the hearing impaired pupils were the ones who found it hardest to hear. So the blue column is the ease of hearing, and the red column is the sensitivity to noise. I just wanted to show you this. The students were given sort of a choice of reasons why they were asked to cite rooms in which it was particularly hard to hear the teacher, and then to give reasons why they thought that was so. And the most common reason, again, was students talking. But I also just wanted to point out this one here, too much noise outside the room, and that one was the open plan school. And in fact, the questionnaire, the students were asked, they had an open slot at the end where they could make any free comments they wanted to. And in the open plan school, an awful lot of the pupils had written things like, please can we have our walls back? It was a school that had been converted to open plan. They'd knocked down the walls and it was all new and open plan. And, you know, we'd like some doors and things like that. That was interesting. So just to show you the results, how am I doing for time? Oh, sorry, have I? Just show you the results of the experimental testing. We're actually, although the project finished 4 years ago, we're actually still analysing all these results because we've got so much data. But the students did a mathematics test in 50 decibels and 70 decibels. Well, they did in 3 different noise conditions, but just showing you 50 decibels versus 70 decibels. And these are the various different tasks that we picked out from the mathematics tests: the numerical reasoning, arithmetic, memory. With it buried within it was a sort of memory task, and then again speed of processing. And what you can see is that this is grouped into the younger. There were four age groups, 4 years, so the younger ones and the older ones. And in all the different categories, the older students perform better than the younger ones, but in all categories, the performance is worse in the higher noise level. And the sort of depreciation in performance is greater for the older students. So it looks as if it's the older ones, the 14, 15, 16-year-olds, who are more affected by the noise than the younger pupils. And similar with reading comprehension. So again, there were various different tasks that were picked out. For the students read a passage and then they answered sort of factual questions based on what they'd read. Inferential questions where they were asked to deduce something from what they'd read. And then there was a new word that they learnt within the text. And again, it's the same pattern. The older children perform better. The noise has more of an impact on the older children, and the performance decreases with the in the higher noise levels. So just to sum up, the research is consistent with the results of previous research that I mentioned at the beginning, but we've shown that it's continuous from the age of 7 through to the age of 16. There hasn't been so much work done on the older children in the literature. And we've also now got some sort of real evidence that the pupils with special needs are more affected by noise than the other pupils. And this just shows the sort of the new results that we've found, in that we've looked specifically at the effects of classroom babble. And you can see, in addition to the other effects, we found it has an effect on short-term memory, on reading comprehension, and on mathematics. There's been, again, less work done on the effects on mathematics. And also that it causes annoyance and it interferes with hearing the teacher. And of course, the adverse effects of noise, as we heard earlier this afternoon, can be prevented by good acoustic design of schools. So I'll finish on that note. Okay, thank you.
Thank you so much, Bridget. Aren't you worried about this mathematical decrease? I believe you come from mathematics yourself.
Oh, originally, many years ago,
yeah.
Yes.
So I also did a little bit, and we think it's very important that the students can study mathematics. So do we have 1 or 2 questions for Bridget? Well, I think this was a really nice ending of this day. This really well carried out study with, you actually had a lot of young people in that study, and you were able to come with some new findings, and I think it's in line with Kerstin's maybe, and she wants to ask a question. Yes. Frans?
I was intrigued by your results that the older children were more affected than the younger ones, which is probably against the theories as we know them. But do you think this could, do you have an explanation for this, or could it be due to the tests?
I think it's probably, I was discussing this with Julie the other day actually, and she thinks it's just due to the fact they're doing more complex tasks. But she also thinks that we're going to find, when we keep on digging and digging into the results, something to do with sort of memory or processing. She's hoping that we will find something within there which might then explain why it is in certain tasks that the effect is more on particular groups of students. Yeah.
Once more, we understand that the more we dig, the more complex everything is, isn't it? Like that. Yes. I'm soon going to summarize this day, but thank you so much for now.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.